The Holy Land being on fire might be the reason why Shamrock was brought back to Marijois if I had to bet a fictional pirate money. I think that would be a pretty good bet of fictional currency. Maybe Shamrock was recalled when this crisis began and it seemed like we just needed a little extra firepower to bring it under control before realizing that firepower was a very poorly chosen word as it started burning all of our own buildings. Although what this means is that whoever is attacking the Holy Land is a force powersome enough to keep Shamrock busy. And not just busy, but Emu makes it sound like they're even losing. And there just can't possibly be that many people in the world who are capable of doing that. And this person in question may be the figure shown as part of the One Piece World Seeker promotional material, which is a thing for whatever reason. But if you're curious, the Japanese text says, "The Holy Land Marijois engulfed in flames." Who is this mysterious figure in this untouchable sacred place? So in the game, it is the intention of the very boringly named antagonist Isaac to fly into Marijois and do all sorts of bad things, but that never happens. It never even comes close to happening. And it's very likely that this image was an early concept for the game that never eventuated, but Oda has had this in mind for a while, and I think it's very much to his credit as an author that we as readers can't immediately identify who is responsible for this act. Although I will say that Dragon and the Revolutionary Army taking action would be horrendous for the 2025 Grand Line Review bingo card, because this is the 1 year that we have bet on him doing nothing as per usual. I'm also not sure if he's actually in a position to do such a thing. In terms of the One Piece timeline, we've really only just come back from the Reverie operation. Sabo got back to Dragon during Egghead Island, which I think in terms of timeline happened yesterday? Pretty much no time has passed since Egghead and Elbaf. In fact, it may even still be the same day as the Egghead incident right now. And if so, I don't think that the Revolutionary Army will have had enough time to remobilize and deploy, unless you believe the grand conspiracy theory about Dragon once having been a Holy Knight and being able to use the Abyss himself. Imagine if the mark of the Abyss was his face tattoo, for example. But even then, he'd theoretically only be able to go alone. So as much as the Revolutionary Army does feel like the most natural enemy here, they're not necessarily the most logical one. Unless, of course, you believe in another conspiracy theory of the time dilation happening on Elbaf. And that's why Emu's popping in here being all like, guys, why was taking you so long? It's been weeks since you left. I'm not happy with you. But assuming no time shenaniganry, in the last video I mentioned that the last person of prominence who we saw at Marijois was Fleet Admiral Sakazuki being berated by the world nobles. And so this could be the moment where he's finally snapped. 2 years of being Fleet Admiral with no progress made and getting rather fed up with constantly compromising his own sense of justice for whatever the crap it is that the Five Elders are commanding him to do. That would be such a big shift though, and it would probably mark the official beginning of the final war because the Marines would be fractured. But also the Holy Land could be burning because Sakazuki is the only one there to defend it, and his abilities are not well suited to defense. Although speaking of defense, we do also have a surprise candidate for defender of the Holy Land. My guess is that the Revolutionary Army attacked Marijois, and Blackbeard has been monitoring the situation through Lafitte so he can swoop in, save the Celestial Dragon's collective asses, and then ask to officially be made a king as a reward. Alright, that is something that I keep putting out of my mind because this ambition of Blackbeard doesn't fully make sense to me yet. But yes, Blackbeard's goal currently is to turn Hachinosu into a world government affiliated nation, and he's even floated the name of the Blackbeard, and he originally wanted to use Kobe as a bargaining chip for that admission before Blackbeard found out what sword was and that Kobe was also a sword. But in lieu of Kobe, Blackbeard now has an even more valuable hostage with Monkey D. Garp, and it would certainly be a lot more tempting for the world government to give Blackbeard what he wants with the life of the hero of the Marines at stake. Garp is a symbol of strength and stability that they can't really afford to lose right now. What I still don't get is why Blackbeard wants to be part of the world government so badly. His status as an emperor is already arguably higher than any single king, so making it official must be an integral step in his master plan because his sights are definitely set much higher than that. I do also think that the world government would be absolutely insane to take him up on this because we've already seen that episode. Blackbeard butted up the world government in order to become a warlord of the sea, and he immediately betrayed them with the Impel Down incident. And if he does get made into an official king, he's just gonna do the exact same thing again, but on a much larger scale. He became a warlord to get access to these funky marine-only areas, so there might be some world government-only zone that he's trying to get into as well. Anyway, I don't quite know what he's up to, but the commenter here is very correct. Blackbeard may not be the aggressor with the current Marijois situation, but with the Marines stretched as thin as they are, and with the Holy Knights apparently being useless, if Blackbeard did swoop in here to save the world nobles, then they would probably reward him for that. Because there has been an interesting story thread happening with the world nobles being fed up with their current administration set up to protect them, protect and feed. Their personal guards are useless, and the Marines are suffering defeat after defeat on an unprecedented scale. And even Fleet Admiral Sakazuki was unable to apprehend a singular invader in Bartholomew Kuma. So from the perspective of the world nobles, all of these dudes are beyond useless and causing a food shortage that means they cannot eat their precious lobster. So if Blackbeard was to present them with an alternative option, not one that necessarily completely supplants the Marines, but one that could just be used to bolster their forces, kind of like what the Holy Knights exist to do at the moment, then it may be something that the world nobles are stupid enough and irritated enough to consider. Meanwhile, what the world nobles were stupid enough not to consider was the award-winning flavor of today's sponsor, Fume. This is a gadget that Dr. Vegapunk himself would be proud of, because it is built to satisfy the 3 F's of fidgeting, focus, and flavor. Built from real wood with funky clicky magnets with an ingenious adjustable airflow, Fume is beyond satisfying to use absolutely anywhere, because there's no batteries, no vapor, no chemicals, no nicotine, no nothing, except for the glory of naturally flavored air, which is more akin to herbal tea, with one such flavor being the black licorice core, to manifest your darkest nightmares of everything in the scary monster book, including this kid's mum. A fantastic shot of terror for the tongue, you must try it. And also a fantastic tool for change. Fume isn't literally magical, because that'd be pretty wild, but it can be an extremely magical asset in changing bad habits. So you can and should head over to tryfume.com/grandline-review or scan the QR code on screen and use code GRANDLINE at checkout to get a free Fume topper with your journey pack. And thank you so much to Fume, because it's their continued and consistent support that allows us to bring you the best fictional pirate content possible as often as possible, and also thanks to them for giving me something to fidget with while I am writing and editing. So definitely give them a go, highly recommended, but for now it's back to you, me. The worst thing is if Killingham gets a hold of Frankie. Pluton blueprints. If he knows or just even makes Frankie go to sleep, the blueprints might be swimming in the dream bubble. So that is one of the most horrifying future possibilities I've ever read, and that would be a brilliant use of Killingham's abilities, so brilliant that I don't think that St. Killingham himself would have the agency to do it. Even though he's starting to show himself as a little bit of a prick with all of this burning, I do still have quite a soft spot for St. Killingham. He's just the right cocktail of weird personality plus crazy fruit power that will always make me want more of him. And given our recent revelation regarding Gunko, it's not impossible to see Killingham being put in a similar situation where his memory was wiped and he was then put through some sort of process of becoming a holy knight. The difference being that Gunko is not a saint. This is Saint Killingham, Saint Rimoshifu Killingham. So he's got the holy name and everything. He's like a proper world noble, which makes him a lot harder to redeem. Not impossible, we've seen it done before, just harder. But a lot of this Pluton discussion would also involve someone knowing that Frankie can perfectly imagine the blueprints, because the world government don't seem to be aware of that, as no one ever cares about Frankie, sometimes not even the author of the series. Whenever the Straw Hats hit a new island, if the world government happens to be around, their focus is always on capturing that Nico Robin. So I don't think anyone's paying attention to Frankie anymore, which may one day result in another Pluton being built and not being used by the world government. And one last thing about Killingham is that he does drop a rather important piece of information in this chapter, which is when Imu takes control of Gunko's body, Killingham yells, "Imu-sama?" which is the first confirmation we've had that the Holy Knights know about Imu. Yes, it's been incredibly likely that they do, but it is now confirmed that it's not just the 5 elders who know about him. Imu Def is a baddie. I can't disagree, because look, not only were the Gunko Vessel and Gunko Good theories somewhat confirmed in this chapter, but Oda has also unintentionally confirmed the fan art theory of Imu with giant breasts by having him take control of Gunko. It is happening. It's almost like Oda has been reading every recent Elbaf theory and decided to find a way to bring them all to life. Gaban, a man who a few years prior found the greatest hidden treasure the world has to offer, looking at his newborn son and calling him the treasure of a lifetime, absolutely destroyed me. Now, this comment did briefly mess with my head, because I was all like, what do you mean a few years earlier? But then you remember that Colin is 20, which I've pointed out so many times, but I keep forgetting. And he really was born relatively soon after Scopper Gaban discovered the One Piece with the rest of the Roger Pirates. And there is something incredibly touching about a man who has seen the world's most coveted treasure, but who has found his own personal One Piece in the birth of his child. And during this section, I am 100% convinced that Oda is using Scopper Gaban as a self-insert character to express his own feelings about his own children. He's the most successful mangaka of all time, by far the richest, but his daughters remain his greatest treasure. Gunko being Calico Yorkie's daughter could be hinted at by her heterochromia. After all, it's a common trait found in calico cats. Mate, don't go telling me things like that. I might actually start to believe them. Heterochromia, in case you don't know, is the condition of having two different colored eyes, just like Miss Gunko, and it is indeed extremely common in their calico cats. And look, this is exactly the kind of crap that Oda would pull. So for me, yes, that is 1 point in favor of the Yorkie daughter idea, although it does sound quite depressing. For this to work, surely Yorkie and Brook would have needed to believe that Gunko had died. Otherwise, I doubt they would have set off on their fun pirate journey knowing that she'd been caught. That or Brook and Yorkie pulled a Shanks Usopp maneuver and just abandoned the family to pursue their manly dreams of adventuring the seas. And the only reason why part of Brook's dream at the moment isn't to find Gunko is because he just assumes that she'd already be dead by now. Props to Chopper though. Man saw blood and wanted to know how to get more. Really followed Gaban, knowing his killing technique. Yeah, this was a kind of undoctorly response from Tony Chopper. He saw Scopper Gaban inflict a wound and he was like, mate, I want to know how to inflict wounds. He's turned his medical mind brain away from healing and put his full focus on damaging. And I really do hope that Chopper is able to figure something out. A lot of the other Straw Hats are getting some great moments on Elbaf, but none of those Straw Hats so far are Chopper. So imagine this, right? Chopper follows Scopper Gaban and he does figure it out, and he's able to convert it into some sort of medical understanding that gives him a theory to test, and Chopper then becomes the second person to deal permanent damage to a Holy Knight, or even the first character to damage Lord Emu himself. Almost certainly not, but I can dream. Chopper did bolt after Scopper Gaban though, and he saw him get turned into Scopper Kebab. And in fact, looking back on the chapter, Chopper does appear to have jumped down after Gaban, as depicted by this vaguely reindeer-shaped scribble that I definitely missed the first time around. So he really could be slowly siphoning off everyone and plonking them in the underworld. And if he's down there, then Chopper might even be able to heal Loki faster as well. His injuries are supposed to take a bunch of months to heal, but Gerd is not a genius reindeer, and Chopper may be able to find a much quicker way because he's healed far worse damage incurred by the Straw Hats in the past at much quicker rates, specifically Zoro. Chopper's experience patching up Zoro would make Loki's situation seem like treating a mild cough. But yeah, I didn't even notice that Chopper jumped down the first time I read this, and this is the sort of thing that the One Piece anime is really good for. It might take 5 minutes to happen, but rest assured, no one is going to miss that he jumped down. Of course, this is probably just a skill issue on my part, but something that Oda does do often is portray very important actions in very small scribbles in already small panels. But that aside, I am really looking forward to this duo of Chopper and Scopper Gaban, who until further notice will be labeled as Chopper Gaban. Does Chopper use their immortality power to study medicine? That is another option. Not that Chopper pursues immortality itself, but uses it to discover some sort of scientific fragment that could lead to him developing a cure for all disease. Because as magicsome as all of this regeneration is, if it is happening, then it is possible to replicate through science, as Vegapunk has started to prove by duplicating Devil Fruit powers. So this could be the unexpected key to realizing Chopper's up until now extremely unrealistic dream. Hell of the Crimson Lotus reminds me of Impel Down Level 1. I wonder if there's a connection. Alright, I am so excited that somebody else noticed this. I really wanted to point this out in the chapter review, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about all these weird rabbit holes with all of the other crap that was happening. But get this right, when Scopper Gaban rocks up, Summers tries to use an attack that's been translated as Hell of the Crimson Lotus, where he turns the blades of grass below him into spikes, and so his abilities may be responsible for creating level 1 of Impel Down the Crimson Hell, which was the exact same idea. It was a forest of spikes that had been turned red by the blood of those who had been impaled on them. So here's what I think happened, right? When this level was being conceived, they brought in an actual forest and some actual grass. They grew it. It probably looked lovely, too lovely for Impel Down, and then had Summers use his ability to turn the whole forest into spikes, because the Crimson Hell is even named directly after his ability. That or the other way around, Summers was so inspired by Impel Down that he replicated it, but that's the much less simple solution, although it also could have been done by the former user of his Devil Fruit. Either way, what we saw in this chapter was almost certainly the origin of level 1 of Impel Down. Man, it's kind of crazy and cool that the monster trio have become so powerful that they need to be taken out of the story in order for things to be able to happen. That is exactly what's happened, although this has been a fairly common trend of One Piece. Luffy almost always gets distracted or trapped in something to keep him from showing up until the final fight is ready. Zoro gets conveniently lost until it's time for him to cut something, and Sanji, to his credit, is usually much more in the main meat of the conflict, but it's not usually enough to take care of things by himself. But I do also think we're at a point where it would be difficult to see Zoro, Luffy, or Sanji being caught by, say, Gunko, like most of the crew are now. We know what they can do, so it would just be too much of a narrative leap to buy. So Oda has been keeping them out of the picture for interesting things to happen. The problem with One Piece is I always want to hate the bad guys, but they're always hot, charismatic, or both. Exactly right. You just feast your eyes on this hot pot of charisma right here. This is why the Holy Land made the St. Charles pinup calendar to begin with. I'm not sure if you heard or saw, but the Boston Red Sox held a One Piece themed night, and it was really amazing to see everyone there for the game. Alright, full disclosure, I know nothing about baseball. It's a sport that we Australians find incredibly boring, which is extremely hypocritical because this country obsesses over cricket, of all things. But I had to look this up, and it seems like a really fun night. I love that One Piece is breaching the mainstream through all of these avenues of sport, because this is far from the only time. One Piece also did a special night with the Lakers featuring a custom animation, and they've also done a collaboration with Dortmund in Germany, and at the moment it seems like it's a race for every team in every league to get that exclusive One Piece collaboration. They've done this so many times now that I've lost track, and so if there are any other major teams in any relevant sport that has done this, then put it in the comments. I want to see it. But here's one negative thing I will say. You've got to feel pretty bad for whoever's going up against the team that has the endorsement of the future Pirate King. It really sucks to be them. Not every pretty woman got redemption. Just look at Black Maria. Alright, for that I would say let's wait until the end of Yamato's cover story, because we did already get an ulti redemption, so more could happen. Watch closely as Oda transforms Brook's "Can I See Your Panties" jokes into one of the saddest scenes in Elbaf. Gunko most likely loved a certain pattern on her undies, and Brook foolishly hoped to find her that way. Alright, this sounds completely insane, but also it could really happen. Oda could turn the panties joke into one of the hardest hitting moments in the series. He has the narrative powers to do so. And even if it's not that exactly, there must be an origin to this gag. We didn't see him do it in his flashback with the Rumbar Pirates, likely because that was an all-male crew, and we never saw them encounter any women, so there was just no one to ask. So this was either something that started before he became a pirate, or a behavior he developed during his 5 decades of loneliness. But this is something that would reshape how we view such a huge chunk of the series. When going back and rereading or rewatching Thriller Bark, it would no longer be the nostalgia of a wacky skeleton asking for panties, but more of a moment of your significant other asking why you are tearing up over a wacky skeleton asking for panties. That is the One Piece effect, and I cannot wait to see what Oda has in store for Brook's history. And thank you so much again to Fume for sponsoring this video, and definitely check them out through the link in the description.